Hey folks, well, a little bit of a change of pace here. I wanted to spend a bit of time talking about academic integrity and computer science. There have been a couple of issues recently where it's become clear that students aren't sure of what's okay and what isn't, where the boundaries lie in terms of helping each other and sharing code. And so I just wanted to kind of go through things from my perspective and let you know what my expectations are. And I think to touch on what expectations are in general in the field. So, first off, from the official point of view, the VIU official academic code of conduct that is at this URL, and it's really important that you go through and read it and understand it because you are obligated to follow this code of conduct. If you come along later and say, "Oh, well, I didn't know this was wrong," we're going to say, "Well, no, too bad." You're required to follow the regulations at VIU. So it's important for you to understand what they actually are. So read them and understand them. Be aware of the consequences because there can be fairly serious consequences if if you're judged to have engaged in academic misconduct. So again, I want to be clear about what my expectations are and to try and come up with some sort of common sense ground rules and guidelines for you. Things like, when is it okay to use code that I've found someplace else, online or in a textbook when I'm submitting a lab or submitting an assignment? How much is it okay to help other students? What kind of help can I give them? Or what kind of help is it okay for me to get from somebody else? So hopefully I can go through and at least provide somewhat clearer guidelines on that. I did want to talk a little bit about why I care about this. When a student does engage in some form of academic misconduct and gets away with it, then essentially they're in a variety of ways gaining an advantage over the students who are actually doing things honestly, if you like. If there's a waitlisted course, then that this material is a prerequisite for it, then by getting into that course without actually knowing the previous material, they're taking away a seat from somebody who deserves to be in it. For programs that have competitive entry, for scholarships, all that sort of thing where grades are a factor, again, they're gaining an undeserved advantage over other students. And then, purely from the point of view of the student themselves, if you don't truly understand the material and get some extra help to pass without learning the actual material, then it is far more likely that in your next course or the one after that, you're going to wind up struggling and possibly failing because you don't know the things that we assume you know that you must have known to get through the earlier courses. So it is an important issue and it does impact a number of people. So, in terms of the practical side of things, you know, when can I use code that I've grabbed from somewhere else? And one of the things that I hear a number of times is a student will say, well, in industry, if I found some code online that solved a problem I was given, it would be fine for me to use that. And I want to talk about that from a couple of perspectives. First off, assuming that it was code that you actually had the right to use, you still have to make darn sure that you understand exactly what that code is doing before you plug it into someplace, right? If there are any bugs, any malicious elements in that code, then you're opening up your employer or your client to all of the problems that go along with that because you cut and paste bad code. You're putting your company at risk of legal action if you don't actually have the rights to use that code. There are often all sorts of issues associated with code that's posted online, right? You can't kind of blindly trust what's out there. And even code that is good and reliable is generally focused on a specific version of a language, a specific version of a compiler, a specific platform for it to run on. And you have to be aware enough to pick up on the subtleties where a particular piece of code doesn't apply in your case or has problems associated with trying to translate it into what you are trying to do or where you are trying to use it. So there are some important issues in trying to grab code from other sources in the first place. The other big thing is that in an industrial situation, you're being paid to produce a product so that that product can be used. In an academic setting, you're being asked to develop a solution to a problem so that you can get the experience in actually designing the solution, implementing it, and debugging it. That experience is the important thing in what you're getting. And you're also trying to show us that you have the capability, the understanding to actually do it yourself. Right? The world doesn't need another binary search routine for going through an array of floats. The objective in the programming assignments is to get you to have the experience, the developmental experience, and to show that you are capable of doing this on your own so that you're then ready to go on and tackle other more complex problems. So you're trying to demonstrate to us that you personally have the skills to solve that problem. Finding somebody else who's already solved it for you is not the same thing. So again, these are really why we're focused on you doing this yourself. Now, getting help from others is kind of a trickier one because one of the best ways we learn is by helping each other learn, by talking to other people, by kicking around problems. And it is one of the most valuable things, one of the most valuable approaches that you can have to learning subject material. But there's a huge difference between helping somebody learn something and giving them the solution or giving them a part of it. So some of the things that I would regard as okay would be helping somebody with the syntax of a specific language feature. This is the way you do structs in C++, right? This is the syntax that you have to use. This is the syntax for creating an iterator for a standard template library class. So there are helping somebody understand the syntax for a specific feature. That's fine. Helping somebody work through their debugging problems, this loop keeps crashing. Helping somebody to work through those kinds of problems, but getting them to solve it themselves, right? Talking them through what kinds of things you need to look for to solve the problem, what kinds of issues you might be seeing, getting them to look at the error messages that the compiler prints out and trying to relate those to the actual source code they're working with. That kind of guidance is helpful and valuable. But actually just giving them the solution, telling them how to fix it, is not helping them learn. Right? Helping people spot places where their code might not be following standards. Again, I would tend to regard that as beneficial as long as it's not a case of you're going through and fixing the code for them or telling them, indent this 3 spaces. We all have problems looking at our own code and spotting small places where we've deviated from standards, or even recognizing a place that, did you know that we're supposed to be, we're supposed to be following maximum line length conventions or something along those lines. I didn't even realize that. So they can go through and fix it themselves. But again, it's making people aware of things rather than directly giving them the solution for something. Going through and, when a programming problem is posted, talking about the problem, making sure that everybody understands the meaning of the problem is fine. Kicking around different ideas for, I think what I would probably do is talking through the kinds of approaches that you might take and the pros and cons of different approaches. Again, I see that as fine. But that's vastly different than going through and giving them chunks of the code to let them, copy bits and pieces instead of figuring out the solutions. So again, things that I would regard as not okay is essentially giving them chunks of the code in any way, shape, or form. You can't print out a copy and hand it to them. You can't give them an electronic copy of your code for them to work from. You can't dictate. I've had people tell me, oh, well, I didn't actually give them the code. I just read it out and they typed it in. So they wrote the program themselves. That's not them solving the problem themselves. They haven't learned anything except a little bit of typing practice. So these kinds of things fall into the realm of not okay. Again, in my opinion. When you are using code from other sources, and there are times when an instructor will say, yeah, no, it's okay for you to find code, online in these circumstances or for this part of the problem. But the instructor will make it very clear in those cases that for this you are allowed to, blah, blah, blah. But you need to be very, very sure that the instructor has said it is okay to use code from other sources for this particular piece of a program or this particular piece of a project. And if you do that, you must, absolutely must, give a citation that absolutely identifies what code you got from where. Right? Identify the chunk of code that you used from someplace else, who produced it, right? The name of the author, the exact code segment that you were using, the date and the URL if you got this online, or the book and page number if you got it from a text, the journal and article and page numbers if you got it from a journal someplace. So again, but you must identify exactly where that code came from. Failing to do that is plagiarism, right? It's presenting other people's work as your own. And again, that's a very clear form of academic misconduct. As far as exams and quizzes go, again, you pretty much have to assume that everything is individual work unless the instructor tells you otherwise. As far as my courses go, there are very few circumstances where I will allow joint work, right? All of your labs, all of your projects, all of your exams and quizzes tend to be strictly individual. So you cannot give people pieces of the answer. You cannot discuss the questions with anybody who, essentially before the exam time is done for everyone, you can't be discussing that content with other people. Right? You cannot in any way, shape, or form be giving people an advantage about the material that, again, it's an advantage over other people in the course. It's giving them information. It's giving them, if you give people what the questions are, if you give people what the solutions are, that is not okay. Just to kind of wrap up, so this is my kind of informal, unofficial look at the way academic misconduct investigations take place for us at VIU. So again, this isn't official policy by any stretch of the imagination, but this is more or less the way I think things are currently running. So if the instructor thinks that there might have been an instance of academic misconduct, then the first thing they do is just kind of dig a little deeper and see if they can identify whether there is or is not a problem themselves first. But then they talk to the students, right? It's entirely possible that the instructor misunderstood what was taking place and what the students did was actually just fine. So the first thing is to go through and talk to the students. After that, if the instructor still thinks that it might constitute academic misconduct, then they file a report with the dean of the faculty. So in our case, the Faculty of Science. The dean reviews the information that the instructor gave them, and the dean also talks to the student, again, to get their take on the situation. So the dean has sort of both sides of the story. The dean then makes a decision, notifies the student and the instructor. If it is judged to be a case of academic misconduct, then kind of common repercussions are, if it's a first offense, it's entirely likely that it'll be sort of a 0 on the assignment. If this is a copying situation where one student gave another student part of the answer, then the penalties apply to both students, not just the person who kind of got the copy. So it might just be a 0 for that assignment or that quiz or that exam flat out. If it's a second offense, then it might very well be an automatic fail for the course. Period, end of story. If it's a third or subsequent offense, then it's entirely possible that it will result in a suspension from the university for some period of time. And the other big thing is these instances are tracked by the dean across courses. So it's not like you get kind of a first offense, a second offense in each individual course. You know, if something happens in one course and then something happens in another course, that is regarded as a second offense, period. So that can very well be a fail in the second course. So do keep that in mind. That again, this is one of the reasons why I would like you to go back and go over the VIU regulations and to be aware of the possible consequences if what can happen if you do drift into academic misconduct. I guess one of the big things I would suggest is if you're in doubt, ask. I don't think most instructors mind if somebody asks what's okay and what isn't, and if there's a specific circumstance. Is it okay if I use this? Is it okay if I do this? Ask. I certainly don't mind answering that question, but I don't believe most of the other instructors would either. All right, I think that was everything I wanted to go over. Again, please let me know if you have questions on the matter.